I need to have a Disney princess moment. I'm so mad.
Hey, thanks for joining the Escape With Me Book Club. Escape with me, Lizzie Sawyer.
And me, Sam Reiner.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We're going to be covering it from beginning to end, so remember, there will be spoilers.
Today we're going to England, then to China. Published April 25th, 2006. Throne of Jade is the second in the historical fantasy Temeraire series. The Chinese emperor has learned that the egg, meant for Napoleon, has made its way into the British army and has sent an envoy to retrieve the dragon. Unfortunately for them, Temeraire and Laurence are rather bonded, and Temeraire won't leave without his rider. Forced to allow Laurence and the crew to come along, strange things begin happening on the ship. It's starting to look like they will be lucky to make it to the Imperial City alive, let alone convince the Emperor to allow Laurence to stay with Temeraire. So background, this is a you pick.
Most dragon books are.
I'm curious, did you read the books one after the other, or did you have a break between them?
Pretty sure I did. It's been a hot minute since I read these for the first time.
They did come out in 2006.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure I binged a whole bunch of them in one go. I didn't binge all of them in one go, but I did read at least 4, maybe 5.
That's a good amount.
Because I usually get to, when they go to Australia, I get to that book. And then I usually stop after that book, partly because reading that many books consecutively in the same series can be a little bit numbing on the brain. I take too long to pick the series back up, and then I have to start over.
Yeah, let's see. Because there's a lot of books in the series. There's 9 books in the series. It seems to have ended in 2016. That's a lot of books. I have no idea when they go to Australia. It's going to be at some point. She goes all over the place. It's great.
Yep. There's a lot.
Jeez. Did all 3 just come out at the same time? So, okay, the third one came out on May 30th, and the first one came out in January. So yeah.
Bam, bam, bam.
3 books in the beginning of the year. Here you go.
With how consecutive the story is from one book to the next within those first 3, she may have written all 3, and then either her editor or her publisher were like, we're gonna split this up. You gotta cut them down just a little.
Yeah, I'm just shocked the publisher was just like, yes. Within a 5-month span, let's publish 3 books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Goodness. So age level is adult. Content warning, not too much. This book. There's implied sex, but if you don't like it, you can just pretend it's not. It's barely even wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Oh, yeah, barely.
But graphic violence, blood, death of a child, torture, and slavery.
Yep.
Also, they do use a racial slur for the Chinese. There you go. I feel like the last one was longer, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. This one has a lot more political intrigue and less doing stuff.
Yeah, I felt like this one's a little bit more interesting because it's like world building for China instead of world building for like, and this is how we use dragons to fight. And this is how we use dragons to fight. And this is how we use dragons to fight.
It wasn't even, this is how we use dragons to fight. This is how we train dragons to know how to fight. And then we do this to train them to know how to fight. And then we do this. It's the whole second part.
Yeah.
The second part of the first book is rough.
And this is how we train you to train dragons to fight.
So just a real quick, judge a book by its cover. We're going to China. I mean, to be fair, you told me that. But from the cover, it really drives it home because it's the Throne of Jade. Oh, wow. Where have I heard that Jade comes from? And then it has the green background and the white dragon. And then the symbol inside of it was a very obviously Chinese structure. No way, we're going to China.
Whoa, wowee.
I kind of like the swirls better than the swooshes of the first cover in the background. Because the first one, it has vertical lines, and it's kind of like paint, but you didn't put a second coat on it, versus the second one, which is like green smoke swirling about. I like it better. Also, the dragon on the cover is a dragon we meet. That's kind of cool, because the first one's very obviously Temeraire.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of needs to be.
Yeah. But, okay, so I don't know how the covers are going to go, because it has that style cover for like the first 4, and then Goodreads is like, I have no idea what to give for the rest of them, and they're all different. So we'll see how that happens. But for right now, we're sticking to it. We like it. It's a good cover. I like it. But yeah, we're going to China, and there are dragons. Ta-da!
Love me some dragons.
It does what it means to accomplish. So we're going back on a boat.
As you do, but this time it's a big boat.
And there's plot.
There is plot. There's plot on the boat.
I mean, I didn't mind it because world building. But yeah, the boat the last time was just all about how Temeraire grows.
And grows.
And grows.
And grows.
And then learns to fish. And then they're there. And then they have to go to Dover. And all the fun stuff. Although they do kind of start off the same with the whole, Laurence can't be his writer, this is terrible. Because the first book, Air Force did it. And then this book, the Chinese are doing it. Is that how the third one starts?
No, the third one's like, we have to get back to Europe. We have to get back to Europe now. Because there's a moment where they're like, oh yeah, there's a war happening. A dude brings them a letter that's like, by the way.
Yeah.
Yo, like, war? Question mark? And everybody's like, oh, war.
But yeah, that's how this one starts, is they separate them, and the British whatever dude that's not Air Force but is something else and is in charge of all the things is like, I'm gonna just scapegoat Laurence.
He's head of the Navy, essentially.
First Lord Admiralty.
Yes. Or he was a naval officer. He may be over the military branch for a certain area. I don't know. He's a top dog that used to be in the Navy.
And the way they said it made it sound like he was a higher rank than the Air Force people, but not necessarily in control of. I'm not 100% sure how that works.
I would need to deep dive into
how the British naval and military is set up.
Yeah, and I'm not invested enough to do that.
No.
He's a high-ranking officer that used to be in the Navy.
Yeah. So anyway, the book basically starts, and the Chinese have showed up off screen and have yelled a lot, and now they're yelling at Laurence on screen.
Oh, they're not yelling at Laurence. They're making the other guy that is his actual superior yell at Laurence. The Chinese are very quiet.
It's gross. And once again, the whole, we just need to separate him. You just need to lie to him. And Laurence is like, I'm not going to lie to him. Gosh, dang it, guys.
And the Chinese are like, but he's above you. He's like emperor status, and you are but peasant. And Laurence is like, excuse you?
But Temeraire likes me. That's kind of where we're at. Because, of course, something happens, and Captain Roland's there for the very brief cameo that she gets.
It's because they're lovers, quote unquote.
And I appreciate her being there to support him during all of this. But yeah, I'm a little sad that we see less of her, because I liked her a lot.
She's in not the next book, but the following.
When they finally get back, yeah, I'm not surprised.
No, not until we get back from Africa. She in the book for like reals again. I'm sorry.
Well, at least I know she doesn't die off screen. That's what I'm worried about. The not callous, but the very omnipresent, hey, I'm going to name you in this scene so I can kill you next scene so we can replace you with someone else so I can kill them because I've finally given them a name too. It's like wearing the wrong color shirt when you're on Star Trek.
Yep.
If you're wearing the wrong shirt, you're gonna die. Like, if you're in this book and you haven't had a line of dialogue and you've never been brought up before and you suddenly have a name, you're dying.
Yep.
Laurence, of course, gets reunited with Temeraire because Temeraire is making a fuss because they're all like, oh, you're never going to see him again. It's totally fine. And he's like, it is not fine. I want my father. And so Laurence shows up, and then immediately Temeraire is like, okay, cool. Grab, fly away.
Yep, there's the only solution.
They really should have seen that coming. He flies away. They go to a place. They end up being roped into going to war. And so they go to war for a bit.
No, they don't even get roped into going to war. It's the Temeraire is like, there's a fight. Yo, there's a fight. I get to fight. I'm going to fight too. You can't stop me. I'm going to fight.
Yeah, there's literally a whisper like, oh, we need to go fight. And Temeraire's like, I'm joining. And then everyone's like,
okay.
I am not going to stop you. We kind of need you.
Oh, it's not even that. It's that if they don't put him in armor, he's going to go anyway. And he's going to get himself hurt.
Yeah.
And so they might as well go ahead and put him in armor because he's going to go.
Oh, I was just talking about the other other captains. The other captains were like, please. So, big thing happens. They get boarded, fight. They manage to capture, but then a weird thing happens and Laurence falls. And I was really confused about this, and I read the passage like 3 times, and I thought the way it was worded that Temeraire had shouted, and that caused Laurence injury, but I'm not sure. Laurence is suddenly injured, and he falls down and passes out.
He tries to save somebody else in a stupid manner where he has to wrap his harness in a weird way, and it cuts into his leg, and so he passes out from blood loss because he's high on adrenaline and doesn't notice that he's cut his leg real bad.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember this battle because there's so many, period.
Yeah, it is literally, the British ships are there, and so the dragons are kind of like backup because it's a naval fight. So the ships are too close together, so Temeraire can't shout, and so a bunch of things happen, but eventually Temeraire gets boarded by French people. And there is a big moment where the lieutenant or whoever, the captain, somebody important from the other dragon gets captured, and Laurence specifically is like, I'm not going to kill you. That's important. But everything else is kind of like meh. Temeraire gets injured. Laurence gets injured, and that's going to be for the rest of it. Blood loss makes a lot more sense. It was just really sudden, and I don't think I realized in the battle that I was like, oh yeah, he got injured because so much stuff happened.
Well, you don't realize he got injured because he doesn't realize that he's been injured because it's from his point of view.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he just passes out.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So anyway, so he finally wakes up and he's in trouble because not only in their minds did he go back and hang out with Temeraire again, he took him into battle, which the Chinese are pissed about, except the admiral dude is an idiot.
Well, yeah, because he doesn't know jack about dragons.
Well, that too, but no, he keeps being so scared of the Chinese, and he's like, I swear to goodness, I'm going to shoot Temeraire.
Yeah, that's the solution.
What? You see how that's worse? That's not a threat. Why are you dumb? Anyway, and then there's a really cute moment because he threatens to shoot Temeraire when the Chinese show up too, and he gets in trouble. He's really dumb. But there's this really funny moment where he's like, Maximus, because they're all in the clearings next to each other. He's like, Maximus, Temeraire's been bad or something. And Maximus just sits up and looks at Temeraire.
And he's like, what have you done? He's like, nothing.
Why have you been bad? Why do I need to hold you down? And Temeraire's immediately, I have done nothing. And Maximus is like, oh, okay.
All right, cool. He says he's not done anything.
He gives me really strong Patrick Star vibes.
Oh, he's not that dumb.
But the lovableness, not in the later seasons, but the lovableness of him, where it's like, Patrick, do the thing to SpongeBob. And he's like, SpongeBob, what'd you do? I don't know. I always think of him as a dragon knight until someone reminds me that he's red and gold, just because he's big belly and whatever, and so I immediately poke him on. But then with the lovable personality of like a Patrick Star, that's super loyal, but really cute. I don't know. I just love it. The moment it was so cute. But yeah. So the Chinese show up again, and they are so mad.
It's because the Emperor's brother is kind of a tool.
I mean, that too. But I like later on that the white dragon on the top is his dragon, and you do kind of realize, hey, there's a dragon he loves, and I like that they give his side of the thing too. But yeah, so that whole thing happens, and then Laurence collapses because he's really badly injured. And when he wakes up, he has to send a note to tell Temeraire that he hasn't died, because Temeraire is just like, oh my gosh.
Because he's written such a really poorly written note prior.
In his delirium, he sent a note like, don't worry about me, you'll be fine, or something like that.
Yeah, he's going with the Chinese. We'll be fine.
And so Temeraire thinks he's dead. So yeah, in his delirium, he sent a really bad note, and so Temeraire thinks he's dead, and so he has to send another note to be like, I am so sorry. So anyway, Laurence now has a pretty bad concussion from the fall, and also he'll have leg issues for the rest of the book. The concussion will get over itself a lot faster, but he'll have leg problems for the rest of the book.
He's quote unquote old.
He's in his 40s, I want to say. I don't have my notes from the last book what they told us.
I know, which he's quote unquote old. And also he messed his leg up real good.
I want to actually say he's in his 30s because in the last book there was the whole, oh, once I get this bounty, I can marry such and such and we can settle down and blah, blah, blah. And then the dragon thing. And so he was like, yeah, go marry someone else.
I think we decided he's in his 30s.
That's why I want to be like, he's 35. 5.
Maybe.
That would make sense. Anyway, I don't remember. It was in the last book. I don't have my notes for the last book in front of me. I just have this book, and they don't talk about his age.
Yeah, he's not actually old, but he has messed his leg up real good. He was hanging from several feet in the air by a strap of leather cut into his leg.
Yeah.
Which is probably twisted at quite an odd angle.
Yeah, and they don't have modern technology with x-rays and CT scans, da-da-da-da-da, so they're not sure what happened. They have no idea what's going on, but his leg's injured.
You hurt yourself real good.
Anyway, the important thing is they have this whole conversation and talk, and then they decide, fine, Laurence can come with us to China. That's the important thing here.
Which that should have been the solution from the beginning.
And that's the thing that gets me, because they're like, oh, poor baby, you don't know you're above him. He's still super important. Just go ahead and deign his request to bring this person on. You could have started on such a better foot, but that's beside the point. They tried other trickery. And funnily enough, Laurence knows the captain because he's like, hey, you guys need a captain that can leave war and be gone for like 8 months? I know a guy.
Do I have the guy for you? Which starts out great and ends really bad.
Yeah. So you get Captain Riley. Captain Riley was the third lieutenant on the boat when they got Temeraire.
He was a lieutenant under Laurence.
And it's just that awkward. We had one power structure and now we have a different power structure and now it's awkward. Riley has to make choices for the Navy crew and Laurence has to make choices for the aviators and it butts heads.
Yeah. Gets really bad at the end with the whole feud between the two.
Oh yeah. It starts great. Everyone hates everyone. The Navy hates aviators and they all hate the Chinese and it's great. This is going to be such a peaceful trip.
It's going to be great. It's fine.
And then apparently they have different ideology about slavery because they're parents and they get in a fight about that.
It's a whole thing.
It's just a lot. And so they just bump heads a lot and it's awkward. And I'm hoping in the next book they're like, we're better. We did it.
They don't talk again for a hot minute.
Oh yeah, because they're going back across the continent. Well, dang. Bye, Riley.
You suck. You suck too. Bye.
Oh yeah, there's a war on.
No, Riley comes back into play because Riley takes them to Africa.
Okay, so we're gonna see you guys in book 4. Bye!
Because there's an important bit with Lily's captain and Riley that isn't in this book that for some reason I think is, but it's super not.
There is a moment where Riley finds out at some point randomly that Roland is a girl, and so Laurence has to be like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing.
We have those, you know. So anyway.
Women, gasp.
I get it. It makes sense narratively, but I'm so tired.
There's not much you can do. It makes sense because of the patriarchy.
Yeah, but my husband's point whenever I bring up this series is if you had dragons, things would be so radically different. How are we having the Napoleonic War? Anyway, sometimes I think about like Queen Elizabeth rode a dragon. I feel like people should know that.
Yeah.
Well, technically her handmaid rode a dragon, but that's beside the point. So they're on the ship and everyone hates everybody and it's great. And there's 3 main Chinese dudes. There's the prince. There's Sun Kai, who's younger but more serious.
I think Sun Kai is a scholar of some kind.
He's dressed almost as well as the prince. That's what I wrote down. Anyway, Lu Bao, who there's a very famous same person, or not same person, I had to look that up.
Same person.
It freaked me out because
same person.
It'd be like suddenly meeting a George Washington nowadays. That would be weird. Lu Bao is a really important character in Three Kingdoms, which is a historical Chinese time that I know way too much about. It was just weird. I had to be like, wait a second. Identity crisis. George Washington is right in front of me. You know, that. And so that was fun. Anyway, he's older and he's much more fun at parties. He also got really seasick. And so you don't see him for like a month. And then Laurence is like, hey, here's a Navy trick to feel better. And then he feels better. And then he hangs out more, which is nice. Because like I said, he's the one that's fun at parties. So I don't want to say not a lot happens on the boat because a lot happens on the boat. Not all of it's super plot relevant. When they first set out, I want to say the first or second night. Isn't it the first night that the fight happens with the French?
Yes.
It's nighttime and then all of a sudden Laurence is woken up because Temeraire jumps up into the sky.
Yeah, so it's the first night because they're shooting off fireworks, but they're close enough that other dragons can come assist them.
Yes. So the French attack them at night, which is apparently not a normal.
At night. Sorry.
So many SpongeBob references. And so this time, apparently last time they had a night fight and there was a dragon and they blinded them with fireworks, but this one seems a little different. I can see in the dark, but light won't blind me to the point that I'm useless. So yeah, the French attack them, and the Chinese are mad at Laurence because Temeraire fought.
Yeah, it's all his fault.
What did you want him to do? Sit there and just let them attack him?
No clue, man.
Laurence gets in trouble for that.
Because of course he does.
Instead of the Chinese being pissed off at the French for attacking a Chinese convoy, whether or not they knew it, that's beside the point. It's, that's how they start. The Navy are mad at the aviators for not doing anything. They're mad at the Chinese but they don't find that out until later. Later on, things start going well between them. They're fighting each other all the time, but they come around to Chinese New Year. Or no, before then.
They're crossing the equator.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that would be such a long trip. Sorry, I'm just mentally imagining. You're right. They're going to the equator, and apparently there's this old sailor tradition with the English about Poseidon and blah, 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 blah. They do that. They're having a good time. They kind of curb it so the aviators aren't completely curb stomped, because apparently if you have never gone across the equator before, dunk you in water or something.
And shave your head, I think. Something like that.
Yeah. It's a lot. So they curve that and make it a little bit different. So everyone kind of enjoys themselves. That night they have a feast. The Chinese are there. It's going great until this one random kid on the Chinese side is like, hey, this is great. I'm so glad we were able to come here with you guys. This is so much better than how we got to England, basically. And they're like, did you come across the continent? Or he's like, no, we went by boat, but 4 smaller boats because that's all you guys had at the time. And basically stole 4 boats. And we're like, we're using these.
It's like, you guys are going to take us across the sea. And the sailors were like, no, we aren't.
Yeah, the captains were so uncooperative, but eventually they saw reason, was basically the tone. So now everyone's mad again because they just let this happen. And they kind of did the same thing where they were like, and you will take us back.
Yeah, kind of.
Ugh. So yeah, everything goes back to not being great. And so the Chinese are basically like, you're not allowed on deck because I can't promise your safety.
The British told the Chinese that, yes.
Yeah. So great.
This is wonderful. This is fabulous. Awesome.
Yeah. I did skip over the one time the prince summoned Laurence down and was like, hey, I'm going to guilt you into giving us Temeraire, basically, and not hanging out with him anymore.
And Laurence is like, yeah, no.
Yeah. So he tries to guilt him, and then he tries to bribe him, and then he tries to logic him.
And Laurence is just not having it.
No, and I wish he really would have pointed out again, because he mentions it earlier, but I wish he would have pointed it out to him. Does he really think Napoleon wouldn't have used him for war?
For real.
Because they're still claiming neutrality with both of them, even though they gave Napoleon a celestial, which a part of me thinks that he has another one, because who's to say that's the first one they sent? But then they're like, oh yeah, they're super rare.
It's the only one they sent because Temeraire is a twin egg, and whoever got his egg would be a threat to the line of the throne.
On par to be a challenger for heir. Yeah, no, once we got to China, it made sense. But for right there, I was like, how do we know he doesn't have another dragon? Maybe it's not a celestial, but how do we know they're not sending dragons? That's all I'm saying. What friendship starts with a celestial?
That one.
But I will find that out later. I know you can't tell me either way. So I wish he pointed that out, but I do kind of like that the prince calls England out for being culture leeches.
I mean, they are.
Because they are.
Because at this point, the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Yeah, and all the exports they steal, purchase from the locals.
Yep.
So yeah, they do a Christmas thing, and then they do a Chinese New Year thing, and they keep talking about the Chinese food, and Laurence is always like, oh, this is so weird, because he's never experienced it before, and he's doing, oh, your culture's weird.
Yeah.
Very British of you, says the American pot and kettle and all that.
But it's just thinking that, it's like, it's very American, too.
We don't have a great reputation.
No?
That's fair. But they were describing it, and Laurence is like, oh, this is so weird, but I'm like, I am so hungry right now. All of this sounds so so good.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I was sad. So that's how Chinese New Year made me feel. They even start giving Temeraire fancy food, and I kind of love it. It's a little bit manipulation on their part to be like, oh, we have better food than they do. They just give you raw meat.
In the next book, Laurence has to hire Chinese cooks to go with them. Because Temeraire won't just eat raw meat anymore. I mean, I can't either.
I can't blame him. Once you have 5-star, you can't go back.
Absolutely.
But it was one of the things where Laurence was like, wow, I never thought a dragon might like more than that. And there's a bunch of moments. And sometimes I get really mad at Laurence during these discussions where Temeraire is like, hey, why do the Chinese have it better? Why can't we be like that? Why don't we learn how to read and write and make our own decisions and be able to own property and such and so forth?
I mean, it's partly because the British government's run by old men, and it's really hard to get old men to change their minds about things.
I mean, they're still actively participating in the slave trade, so rights for dragons aren't quite up there yet. Oh, but yeah, it kind of ties into the slavery thing because they go to a slave town and Temeraire sees slavery and the disgustingness of it. And so Temeraire's like, is that me? You're kind of treating us like that. And Laurence sometimes gets defensive and he's like, Temeraire, you just don't get it. And I'm like, Laurence, you just don't get it. He's making great, valid points.
And honestly, I'm with Temeraire on this one. Laurence, you don't get it.
And so they have this conversation like 3 times, and it takes them seeing everything in China to be like, oh, their streets are wide enough so dragons can walk down them. They have classes where human children learn stuff with baby dragons, and they're not paired right away. They get to wait a while, and to get a dragon, you have to do all this certification stuff, and it's a lot of stuff. And dragons write poetry and stuff. And one moment happens where it's like, oh, dragons work, but what if they don't get enough work? And then you see this dragon who isn't able to buy the fancy meat and can only buy the other thing.
That is how this works, yes, but that's a different issue.
I'll just say it like this. I thought it was really interesting how the capitalist society was reversed and suddenly their dragons are kind of under communism because they don't own property. And the communists, well, they're not communists yet, but China was the capitalist society. It was kind of cool. I thought that was cool. But yeah, it takes Laurence actually seeing it in process to be like, okay, yeah, Temeraire. Because Temeraire has always been on the verge of revolution.
Viva revolution! Yeah.
Why can't I just kill random sheep and take them? And it's like, no, we gotta live in a society, man. It's like, oh, okay. Why does a society suck for us?
What's funny, he goes to China and it's like, wow, these dragons, they live in a society. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's also a point where he's like, oh, I don't own property. And Laurence is like, well, I buy you that jewelry. And he's like, yeah, you do buy me this jewelry, but what about others that don't get jewelry? And it kind of reminded me how women would inherit their mother's jewelry because it was worth something. And if she needed to run away or she suddenly needed money, she could sell the jewelry. So she had some form of property since they weren't allowed to own property. It was a little interesting little thing right there. Little historical flashbacks with those. And so it kind of made me think of that. So that's a society woman who's able to get jewelry versus a poorer woman who would probably need to stay with her situation longer because she can't get out. She has nothing. And so it was an interesting parallel there. But yeah, Laurence doesn't get it.
Well, he benefits.
Yes, exactly. So he can't see the inequality truly.
I mean, he gets there.
He gets there, but yeah, there are several conversations where I feel like banging my head against the wall with him. Because it was the same thing with like, but women! I was like, oh, I'm so tired.
He gets more there in later books.
I get it, but I am so tired.
Wow, it's like the real world. I understand how we got here, but I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. But yeah, anyway, the Chinese are trying to kill Laurence, but maybe not, but maybe yes, but maybe not.
Some of them are trying to kill Laurence, and other of them are not trying to kill Laurence. Depends on who you're talking to.
But is it the prince? That is the question. Also, at this point, they split the deck up where the dragon area is to be like, okay, they can't just stay in their cabins for another 8 months and not have like fresh air. So they split up the dragon area deck. And so they're able to stand near Temeraire. And all of a sudden, the prince is teaching him letters and different Chinese phrases and all this stuff. And Laurence sees it for what it is. But also, you can't get mad because Temeraire is excited about it.
Yeah, he's learning about where he came from.
My thought would be, because to me, it's like a child learning something new, a hobby that you're not really interested in necessarily. I would still get involved with the hobby. I feel like Laurence could still try.
Yeah, but the prince isn't going to teach him language like he's teaching the dragon.
Yeah, but he could still get involved with Temeraire about it. Anyway, he just kind of lets it happen and he just sits there awkwardly and moody about it. And is like, I feel betrayed.
We hit a point, it's not in this book, it's in future books, where Laurence starts buying really complicated advanced math textbooks and things to help his dragon continue to learn. Oh my goodness. Laurence starts doing hardcore math.
I can't do those Chinese letter stuff, but I can do the math.
Not of his own volition. He can't do the math, though. He's just reading the math out loud, and Temeraire like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
It's like, good, I'm glad it makes sense to one of us. Anyway, so that's kind of the manipulation to be like, oh, our culture's so good. And then that's when the Chinese New Year happens, where it's like, oh, you know, our food is also really good. Oh, and did you know this amazing poetry? Did you know it was written by a dragon? Just slowly slipping it in. I gotta appreciate the long game.
He does do a good long game, yes.
It's a good long game. Killing Laurence was a little much, but a good long game with Temeraire. Because he does sow that dissension between them of, why does the Chinese have it so much better? Also, a sea dragon happens.
Oh, yeah, that happens. And Temeraire has a whole, I don't understand why I couldn't make it see sense. And Laurence is like, that's because it doesn't speak human language. It lives, like, deep in the ocean. Chances of you being able to communicate with them were so small.
And there is a Color of the Winds moment where it's like, oh, it's not intelligent. And Temeraire is like, why? It's not intelligent because it doesn't speak English? It has its own language, probably. And so he gets all mad, and Laurence, once again, doesn't get it because Temeraire is right.
I completely side with Temeraire on this, yeah. But at the same time, it lives in the ocean. It wouldn't even be able to pick up on social cues because it lives underwater with the sharks and the other sea dragons. It knows sea dragon social cues.
And not domesticated? It's still living in a very scary and prey-filled and predator-filled environment. It needs its instincts. It doesn't need to have higher thought about should I or should I not attack this. Is it food? Is it edible? Eat. Is it trying to eat me? Run away. Or whatever the heck it does.
And I mean, they might have language, but
not in that moment.
It wouldn't need it. I don't get it. It's food. I'm gonna eat this. What do you want? It's food.
If it did, it would be some sort of I communicate through the water. Temeraire does not water. You get disadvantage on your roll when they're hostile. You can't logic anyone. So I get Laurence's point. You couldn't have done it. Like, we had to do the thing or we were all gonna die. But it's a splinter argument off of I'm mad at you for not joining my dragon revolution right away. Because that's what it turns into again.
Oh, it stays that for forever.
Yeah. And at one point, oh my gosh, Laurence. Temeraire was like, oh, we're just slaves to you. And direct quote, I don't consider you a slave.
Yeah, you don't. Doesn't mean the government doesn't.
Wow. First of all, not helpful, super invalidating, and that implies other people do.
Yeah, because they do.
Oh, goodness. Laurence, you don't get it. So, trying to kill Laurence. There's this servant of the prince's, and Chinese New Year, he's super drunk, super on food, going down this ladder to get to his quarters, and suddenly gets knocked against and almost falls down this one-story ladder.
Yeah, a kid tries to knock him out.
Weird. Yeah. And it's said in a way where it's like, oh, it could have been an accident. And I was like, I kind of like the servant, so I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt until he absolutely tries to murder him during a storm with a weapon. Super obvious. It's not great. And Laurence is like, he totally just tried to kill me. And everyone's like, they totally just tried to kill him. And we haven't mentioned Hammond once.
Oh, no. Oops.
Also on this trip to deal with Riley and the prince and all the other people, there is the representative of the crown and the parliament and the crown's interest, Hammond, who is like a 23-year-old man who is going on this super important thing because he knows Chinese. Being bilingual will really get you places in a monolingual society. So it's a complicated relationship for most of the book. Hammond is butting heads with Laurence because the crown's interest versus Lawrence's interest.
Well, that's because Hammond understands Chinese culture and Laurence is like, but that's not how it's done in England. And Hammond's like, I know, your point.
Yeah, but there's also moments like this. Laurence is like, he totally tried to murder me. And Hammond's like, but did he? Do we really want to accuse the Chinese of murder? Which I get, but also so mad. Justice!
And Laurence wants to pin it on the prince, and Hammond is like, no. If anything, the kid was working by himself, clearly. We can't pin that on the prince. That's a big no.
So we're just going to pretend that happened. Totally fine. Okay, bye. There's a lot of moments where they just butt heads. And like I said, I get Hammond doing his job, but I like Laurence, so...
It's a whole thing.
Oh, also, before the sea dragon happens, the Chinese cooks keep completely butchering seals and other things and just throwing a ton of the meat off the decks and the blood into the ocean.
Oh, yeah, for the dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what brings the sea dragon along.
Yeah, because I was immediately like, oh, that's just asking for sharks. That's what mine went to. And then immediately sea dragon. Do you think that was on purpose?
No.
That's really dumb if it wasn't.
They had to force people to take them across the ocean. They probably don't know much about deep sea travel.
I like the way it's done because it's super like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And you don't realize it right away. But right after I put, that's just asking for sharks. They get attacked by the sea dragon, but don't realize at first that it's a sea dragon. And I was just like immediately like, oh, there's deep water dragons, aren't there? There's more dragons.
Yeah, they're all over.
But that was our moment. I was like, was that on purpose or were they just really dumb? That's a horrible idea. So much stuff was going to waste. Anyway, also it smelled terrible. I don't know. There's just some suspicious stuff happening. Anyway, they make it into, I can't pronounce it, Mako? M-A-C-A-O. Their stop where they split up, where the aviators, well, some of the aviators go directly via dragon and then the rest go by boat. At some point, they're like, oh, British ships aren't allowed to da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, oh, we have special permission. And I'm just really curious, do they have a special flag?
Probably.
Or something to be like, hey, we have a Chinese envoy, or are they just on the lookout for a British dragon ship? I was curious. I was like, how do they know? And if they have a special flag, that makes the French attack look more suspicious. Anyway, they're stuck in port for a while the prince writes something and then is waiting for word from the emperor. During this downtime, Laurence goes and checks out, I think it's a French Indie Company. What is the actual historical company that did the things? The East India Company.
Ah, yes.
Ha! Finally found it. So they talk with them, and things are not going well for the British. And it's seeming like the French and the Dutch are getting special attention, which is bad because, war with France,
Gotta love me some war with France.
There's a war going on. Hammond just argues with them for hours about it to be like, oh, they aren't giving special permission. I'm gonna just say that they give France a celestial and be done with it. Favoritism! And I know they're gonna get into it eventually, but I'm just over here like, not neutral! But they're acting like they are because they're playing the long game. So this is where they split up, where Laurence and 10 people, plus the 2 kids, one of the kids died during the fight with the French. So the other 2 kids get to go along, because I was like, of course they're gonna go along. And then they were like, nope, we're gonna choose 10 men. I'm like, oh, come on, this would be a great trip. And then someone's like, hey, they're really filio, so you take the kids. They're gonna expect you to be there with kids. Okay, cool. So the kids gotta go along. It's like, yes. Because I was expecting at least Roland to go, because kind of main character syndrome.
Yepers.
Of course they get to go. One of the East Indian Company guys is like, yeah, Laurence is their guardian. And they're like, oh, okay. You don't count against the tally. So he picks 10 people. I feel bad for all the people that didn't get to go, especially the first lieutenant. Like, I get it. He's the next in command, so it makes sense, but that sucks. Then again, considering what ends up happening.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Both. So this is the point where Hammond starts doing stuff that benefits Laurence, being like, do not let them separate you. You are staying together. And there's one point where the Chinese ask a question and Hammond's like, they just asked this. Say something very loudly so I can pretend like you complained. And Laurence is just like, I totally would have complained, but now that you have asked me to complain, I don't know what to say. I am so angry, you know? So Hammond immediately turns around and he's like, oh, he's so angry, as you saw.
Yep, so angry. Very mad.
But yeah, of course, the places they're staying is beautiful. The gardens, the pavilions, the other dragons. And then there are men and women dragons. And they're shocked to see another celestial. So this is where you meet the white dragon. She is an albino, which is fun. Not for her, though. She's bad luck.
The China culture that sees white as a semblance of death, and so she's unlucky.
Yeah. So they were gonna give her to a Mongolian leader, but the prince was like, no, celestials need to stay in the royal family. And considering China's long history with the Mongolians, I don't think that would have been a good idea. Anyway, you learn that this dragon loves him just like Temeraire loves Laurence, and his whole thing with Temeraire coming back, he didn't want him to go in the first place, but also kind of to play politics and get somebody else on the throne so he can be the puppet ruler. I don't know. At this point, I kind of liked him, and so I was a little sad when it was like, yeah, he is just kind of being terrible. Dang it. I feel so bad for that dragon. Do we know what happens to her?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 books from now.
Well, at least she's not put to death.
No, she's fine.
Okay. Well, that's good at least.
She's very angry, but she's fine.
So they're staying at this one place inside the city, which is like a corner of the palace, and they're relegated to only this place. And I was like, okay, cool. We'll just hang out, I guess, forever. And then they wake up one day and no one's there.
Yep.
And Temeraire's gone, and it's just the British hanging out. And then Sun Kai shows up and is like, hey.
So we need to leave now.
Laurence is like, what? And he's like, no, we need to leave right now. People are coming to murder you.
Laurence is like, but if we do that, Temeraire won't know where we are.
And how do we know to come with you? Maybe you're trying to murder us. And at this point, Temeraire's met his mom, and so he hangs out with the mom sometimes. So that's where Temeraire has supposedly gone. Don't even get me started. The only time I've been so mad at Temeraire. But that's beside the point.
He didn't know that people were going to try to kill his crew. How was he supposed to know?
True. It's just... Anyway, and so they've done a couple of things, like they met the French ambassador. Okay, there was a formal dinner when Temeraire got in, and whoever did the seating chart loves drama. Because Temeraire is sitting by his mother with the other dragons, but Laurence is sat next to the French ambassador. Yeah, let's put the French next to the British. That'll work great.
I mean, it turns out okay.
Yeah, because apparently, when I mentioned earlier, he spared that one dude. That's the French ambassador's nephew. So he's like, hey, I like you because you didn't kill my nephew. And Laurence is like, oh,
he was good.
I think I can have a good conversation with you. And they managed to actually have a really good conversation. But Hammond's super suspicious about it. And he's like, oh, he's really cunning and whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if he's lying about the nephew? Totally made that up or something. He didn't. It's real. He's actually a very nice man. You find out later that he totally was not being cunning about it. It was like, oh, okay, I take it back. Dang it, Hammond. You got it wrong again. Anyway, like I said, they wake up one day and no one's there.
And then they start barricading the entrance and getting ready for battle. And then they battle and they battle and they battle and they battle and they battle. And eventually there's just so many dead bodies and the attack stops. And they're so tired that when Sun Kai comes back, they're like, okay, take us with you.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's all day and then through the night. And it's one of those cases of numbers versus technology, because they have guns and the other people have swords, but they have a lot of them and they're tricky and they come around the back and all. Oh, it's a lot.
It's warfare for a hot minute and then it's done.
Yeah. And this happens right after the prince came by and this random kid is just hanging out with. He's like, oh, let the child hang out with the dragon. And thankfully, there's other children there. So Roland and the other guy, Dyer, I think.
Morgan died, yeah.
Distract him with Jax. And so he doesn't really do the thing he's supposed to do. But Laurence is immediately like, you're trying to bond them. You can't come back here with him. And so right after that, Sun Kai shows up and is like, hey, they're going to try to murder you. And so that whole thing happened. Oh, goodness. Suspicious. Let's just say that. Because once again, it's, oh, this group of people totally by themselves have decided to come and attack you. Totally.
Absolutely. For no apparent reason. They just want to kill you.
Just because you're there. And they just so happen know exactly when everyone's going to be gone, including the guards and all the dragons. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So yeah, I love it because Senkai kind of shows back up and they're just like, okay, we'll go wherever you were going with you. So that's when you learn from other people that Temeraire has been quote unquote in seclusion. And I'm not mad at Temeraire. And granted, he's not thinking like Laurence is with the whole don't help out the Chinese. But you find out that he was quote courting a nether dragon that they use because there's only so many celestials. And at this point, it would be incestuous for them to have relationships. So there's this other type of dragon that they mate with to try to create more celestials. And I'm just like, don't give them another celestial. Temeraire, keep it together. We don't need another baby. And so I thought that's kind of where they were going. Oh, if we can't have you, we're going to have another celestial or something. But that doesn't really get brought up again. So I guess it wasn't going where I thought it was. But it was just like, dang it. But yeah, this is when you learn about the twin and this whole thing. Someone else wrote him. He could be potentially emperor. Because the prince gave up the chance to rule because he chose the albino dragon. And that's bad luck. And so he could not be emperor with an albino dragon. So it went to this other guy. And so you find out, yeah, it's true. He did try to set up this other child and he was going to be kind of the puppeteer behind him because a child. And they went on this shopping spree because they were like, hey, let's take Temeraire out and show him the city, you know, just for no reason whatsoever. Not at all to show him how much better dragons have it here. Not at all. They go on the shopping spree basically, and Laurence buys a couple different things like china and stuff. And because of the fight, most of his stuff gets wrecked. And the only thing left unbroken is this beautiful red vase that has a beautiful painting on it. I'm glad something made it, because gosh.
That vase comes up again. That vase gets talked about so much in the next book.
Good.
That vase sticks around. I forget what the fate of the vase is, but it stays around for a while.
Because I think it was supposed to be a present for his father who likes this stuff.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, so Temeraire feels guilty, but not enough to stop mating. I would be so paranoid. Every time I hang out with this person, are they trying to murder my writer? But it just never comes up again. They just are like, yeah, clear the dead bodies, don't really clean up the blood. They come back only to get their stuff, what's left of it, and that's when they find the vase. And they're like, cool, you got rid of the bodies, but that's a lot of blood. And so then they stay with the heir, which I think is very interesting, because I wonder if the heir was on to the prince and was like, I don't know. It never comes up. So maybe not. So at this point, Lu Bao invites them to a British-style dinner because they haven't had home food in forever. And Laurence is suspicious because Lu Bao is a member of the group of people that came and attacked him. So they're like, oh, maybe he's involved. Not at all, because Lu Bao is actually fun at parties. And so he's like, you know, we just need to stop this because clearly this isn't working. The Emperor should just adopt you to save face. And so that way you can keep your dragon and no one loses face. And Hammond's immediately like, yes, we're doing this.
Hammond's like, is that a thing? Can we do that? Is that a thing? Can we do that? That would be great. Let's do that. And Laurence is like, what? And Hammond is like, shut up. Can we do that?
I've physically read the book. So we're getting to near the end of the book when I'm just like, how are we going to Deus Ex Machina out of this? I have like 20 pages left. And then I was like, he should just adopt you. I was like, oh, there we go. I was worried.
Yes.
So there's a play that they go to. And right before that, Temeraire gives Laurence a really, really nice sword. And so I was like, okay, I forgive you for the most part.
Yeah, because Temeraire's mom's like, yeah, so normally the parent of the dragon gives the individual that ends up becoming the companion of the child a gift. And I clearly was unable to do that. So feel free to pick something from my massive amount of treasure to give to your companion.
It's a cute moment because he's so worried Laurence won't like it. He's like, do you love it? I hope you do. It's like, okay.
And Laurence is like, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever received my entire life.
I mean, it's really nice. It's worth the Celestial's hoard. After that, they go to a play, and Hammond's looking at where everyone's sitting, and suddenly he's like, oh my gosh, he has a Jimmy Neutron moment, and is like, the prince was trying to bond him with his other prince, and they're related, and he's trying to usurp the throne, and da-da-da, all of a sudden. I was like, oh my gosh.
There it is. It all clicked for you, Hammond, didn't it?
It was a lot, all of a sudden, at the very end.
The author was like, I'm gonna wrap this up real quick, right here, right now.
Yeah, and they're like, oh my gosh, next he's going to kill the emperor! The prince sat down next to this young boy, and Hammond was like, oh my gosh, he's trying to create a reagent. He's trying to take over the throne. He's gonna kill the emperor!
I mean, it doesn't feel out of place. It works.
He turns out to be right, but that was a lot. I was not expecting him to just jump to he's trying to murder the emperor.
Well, I mean, Hammond has proven through this entire book that he tends to just kind of jump to things and get very excitable.
Really commits to the first decision that comes to his brain. Good news is he turned out to be right, because they're at this show, and then all of a sudden somebody from on stage throws a dagger into Lawrence's shoulder.
Boom, you're dead, kid.
This was a terrible murder plot. He's standing right there. He doesn't run away.
Okay, but to be fair, he's on stage with a bunch of other people in masks that also have fake knives, and there's a lot of really loud music going on. And so, with all of the lights and the streamers and all of that, no one's really going to notice that he's thrown a knife, and no one does until someone notices that Lawrence has been stabbed.
I will give you, it should have worked like that, but they're moving around and doing acrobatics, and Lawrence knows immediately who did it because they're standing still.
Well, they're the only one without a knife.
That too. They're standing on stage without a knife, and I'm just like, this was a terrible idea. Even if it worked, okay, let's say it worked. You've just murdered a Celestial's handler in public. Everyone here is at risk all of a sudden. He's gonna be so upset. All of the performers are dead. Anyone in the first couple rows is definitely in the splash zone, possibly dead.
Do you think he's gonna care? He wasn't paid to live. He was paid to potentially die and kill this problematic person.
Well, I'm just saying, why is the prince there with his wanted to be planted aid? Anyway, he shouldn't have murdered him at the play. It's really dumb. He ends up dead. Temeraire kills the assassin immediately and then turns to the prince because he knows the prince has been doing all this. So the other dragon, the white dragon, starts fighting Temeraire. Everyone's running away and everyone's getting murdered because stages are splintering and all this stuff. It's like, not a great idea. Anyway, Lawrence saves him once, the crowned prince, the real prince, but the other one has no protection or anyone around, so he gets killed. And I was kind of sad about that because, like I said, I was starting to vibe with him a little bit. I liked that he liked his dragon and that the world had been unfair to, and it's sad. And so up to this point, all Lawrence had known is if you killed who they're bonded to, they just go rogue. They become completely undomesticated and just go crazy. The Celestial doesn't do that though. She is very upset and then silently takes his body into the night. And Lawrence is like, I thought she was going to murder all of us.
Yeah, because dragons don't become undomesticated when their captain dies. They just get very distraught, like anybody.
Yeah, emotions. They're allowed emotions. Anyway. But yeah, it turns out Hammond was right, because up to this point, I was like, it's coming from Hammond, 50-50. But then they're like, nope, it was right. He was totally trying to murder the Emperor, and so the Emperor agrees to adopt Lawrence. That was a lot. There had just been so much world building and getting to know the culture, which I enjoyed, but it was a much slower pace through most of the third part. And then all of a sudden, all of this happened in 20 pages. I'm tired now. We get kind of like a 5-page wrap up where the Emperor does adopt him, and Temeraire and Lawrence are sealed as companions. And then the Emperor's like, hey, you don't have family. Get to the children.
Get to making children? You just said get to the children.
Well, I mean, clearly they're not above adoption. They're just like, have the children, have family, do it, do the thing. So, all's well that ends well. Hammond's gonna stay behind. Is gonna be sort of like a British embassy, which is a huge deal because apparently the last British delegation did not go over well.
Well, yeah, because they're British and the British are not great with other people's cultures.
Yeah. And so Hammond gets to stay behind and do that. Cool. Bye. I'm exhausted. I'm glad you get to do what you wish with your career. Good luck. And the British ships don't have to do Chinese duties for a year. that year is gonna be real short. Celebration it. Anyway, Temeraire decides to return to England instead of staying in China because that seemed to be like a will they, won't they. But he makes the condition that they need to make things better for dragons, and he also doesn't want to sit around and study all the time like some of the other Chinese do. He's like, I want war. So it's really funny that the next book is, oh yeah, there's a war going on. So they will have more war. So that's the book. I agree. I think I enjoyed it much better than the first one because the political intrigue really does keep the second part moving. I was worried it was just going to be like boat stuff for a whole part, which could be good, but we kind of did that in the last book. But the political intrigue and the conflict kept it going at a really nice pace, even when it was a little bit slower. And then sea dragons is a lot of good stuff. A lot of detail. Kind of got to be impressed with how much she knows about this time period. Is she one of those people that's a history major?
I think so. I feel like we had this discussion when we talked about the last book, and I think that's what the case is.
Let's do this again in case we did it last time. So, she has a bachelor's in English literature and a master's in computer science.
Oh, all right.
Oh, yeah. She developed the Neverwinter Night Shadow of Undertide until she discovered she preferred writing over game design. That is right. I remember that now. It was such a non sequitur. All right, so let's test your theory real quick.
I have a theory.
Yeah, that it was all written together. His Majesty's Dragon is the first novel in the Temeraire series, an alternative history of Napoleonic wars in a flintlock fantasy world where dragons are abundant and used in aerial combat. Temeraire in the Service of the King is an omnibus volume collecting the first 3 books of the series, and it won a award in 2007. Peter Jackson got the film rights.
But he hasn't done anything with it.
Yeah, he didn't do anything with it, so the rights reverted back to Novik.
This would have made a great movie.
So, yeah, I don't know if it was first thought of as 3, but there is a trilogy version. She's just very dedicated to her research.
Good for her.
Because it is detailed. It is really detailed. I would have expected her to be a history major. Probably said the exact same thing in the last episode. But props where props are deserved. If you like super detailed history and you like this time period, highly recommend. It's a good read. Also, if you like dragon fantasy, because lots of dragons. This one, I don't remember. This one doesn't come with the little notes, does it? Like the last one where it's like, oh, let me tell you about dragon races.
No.
Yeah, I didn't remember that. And so I was kind of expecting that. Maybe some more about Chinese races or something, but it didn't happen. So maybe it's something that came later. One question for the author. When did she make a dragon map? Because there has to be a dragon map, right? A map of this is where these dragons are and this is where those dragons are. There can't not be one. That would be so confusing.
Maybe she built it as she went. Every time we end up in a new country, she's like, and there are these dragons. I gotta add that to the map.
At least mentally, there has to be a map. I did see how I like how they were kind of setting up Africa. I knew Africa was going to be in a later book because they're like, oh yeah, there's totally nothing in those places. Just random dragons. Oh, we can't go too far. Otherwise, we might get attacked by those dragons. We're coming back. She's setting this up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious.
It's a whole thing. You wouldn't believe how much of the books is not war.
Surprisingly, especially considering how much the first book set up for war.
Because the first book is war, and the second book is China, and the third book is getting back to the war, and then the fourth book is Africa because of reasons that I'm not going to talk about because they're big plot reasons. And then the fifth book is war, but then the sixth book is, well, okay, well, now we're in Australia.
It's like she started the series and was like, war, but what if not war?
Yeah, kind of.
So I want the dragon map. I feel like it should be released to the public because right now we have British species and French species and Chinese species and hints at African.
Yeah.
I have all of the questions. I want to know where she did her research. Also, 2 questions. She would need some very good sources. That's a lot of information to suddenly know about the Chinese during Napoleonic times. It's very specific. I'm curious where she did her research.
I have a request from the author that I'm going to phrase as a question. How about that?
Okay.
I want to know when the author is going to release a dragonology book that goes through all the different breeds with their skeletal structures and their colorations and the range of where they live. I need that book.
Not to rain on your parade, but she seems pretty into the new series that she's doing.
No, I know.
But rating. I'm going to give it celebrating Chinese New Year's out of 10 minus the overeating part. That sounded very not fun. But in general, it was a fun time. I learned a lot more about Chinese culture and history. A lot of food that I wish I could eat, very much so. But yeah, it was a fun time. A lot of fireworks. Not during a fun time, but still.
I give it Chinese fireworks that make the shape of dragons when they go off out of 10. So that sounds cool.
And there are a lot of dragons. Not as many as last book, but they're on a boat for a really long time, so. Would you read it again? Yeah, the way the series is, I don't feel the need to read the first one to start this one.
Reasons why I've never made it to the last book.
I know the general, they got together and they fought together, and now the Chinese are mad at them. So there's not a lot in the first book where I'm like, I need to read the first book to remind myself of stuff. I feel like I could just pick this book up, and that definitely adds to its readability. I think you're going to read it again. I have a very good feeling.
I have several times.
But would you do it again? Teletubbies, let's go.
Yeah, probably.
Favorite in the series so far? I like this one.
It's so far?
Yes, so we have book 1 and book 2.
Both are good. I don't have a favorite between the two.
Earlier you said you thought this one was better.
It's also been a bit since we've read the first one, though, so...
Fair. But, have you read this book? What country would you like to learn about next? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thanks for exploring Throne of Jade with us. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Lizzie Sawyer.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.